Here with Judging Freedom. Today is Thursday, May 26, 2022. It's a little bit after 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We got a late start because of some technical difficulties, but I see a lot of you lining up, ready to listen to another interview with the Judging Freedom superstar of interviewees, Scott Ritter, who really needs no introduction to this audience, but he is, of course, military. He is, of course, former UN weapon inspector, and he is a clear, consistent, powerful voice on the role of the military in our lives and in the world. Scott, it's a pleasure. Welcome back to Judging Freedom.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
So the last time you were here was about 2 weeks ago. Since that time, the attention of the American public has been diverted to two horrific shootings, one in Buffalo, New York, and one unbelievable one yesterday in Uvalde, 2 days ago in Uvalde, Texas. But the war continues to go on, or the military action continues to go on between Ukraine and Russia. What is the state of affairs as we speak today, May 26, 2022?
Well, it appears that Russia is on the verge of a huge victory in the Donbass. And don't take my word for it. Ask President Zelensky, who says we're getting beat in Donbass. Ask his advisor, who just came on TV last night and acknowledged that the defeat is going to be massive in scale. The Ukrainians are now claiming that the Russians outnumber them 7-1, and that their units can't last on the front line much longer. And it's everything I said it was going to be. The Russians have ground it down. They've achieved major breakthroughs in the very established defenses of the Ukrainians. They're surrounding tens of thousands of Ukrainian soldiers. Thousands of others are surrendering, and they're on the verge of accomplishing their phase 2 objective of liberating the Donbass.
All right. What was their phase 1 objection? To rid Zelensky from power and take back the entire country?
I don't believe so. Remember, the reason why they call it a special military operation is that it's linked to the specific legal requirements set forth in the Russian justification, which is a preemptive collective self-defense under Article 51 of the United Nations Charter. And the preemptive is the important part, because in order to legally cite preemption, you have to say that there is an imminent threat that requires this preemption action.
And what would Putin say was that imminent threat?
Oh, he has said it. It's not what he said. He said it was the accumulation of 100,000 of Ukraine's best forces in eastern Ukraine who were on the verge of launching their own preemptive attack in the Donbass to recapture Lugansk and Donetsk.
Okay. Tell us about Donbass, not its history and not its politics, but its economy and its industrial base. Stated differently, has it been destroyed in order to liberate it?
Well, no. I mean, remember that before this liberation activity under the special military operation occurred, Donbass had been subjected to 8 years of horrific warfare between the Ukrainian army, their Azov Nazi allies, and the two militias, the Donetsk militia and the Lugansk militia. But most of the destruction took place on the line of contact. So there was artillery fire. The towns and cities and villages and farms there were destroyed. But in the depth of the Russian ethnic Russian held parts, there are coal mines, there are manufacturing capabilities, etc., that are untouched. They're still viable. They're still functioning. Now, as Russia breaks through the extensive defensive lines, we could see fighting spill over into untouched industrial areas. But more important in this day and age, when we talk about food shortages, understand that the fighting that's taking place is preventing farmers from sowing their fields. And so it's not just coal that's not getting mined or steel that's not getting forged. It's wheat that's not being sowed. So when the harvest time comes, there's not going to be anything coming out of the ground.
And, all right, is this the breadbasket of Ukraine, Donbass, much
It's
as
part.
Ukraine is the breadbasket of Europe. Donbass is the breadbasket of Ukraine. Do I have that right?
No, Donbass is primarily it's more important towards industry, but there is some agriculture there. There's agriculture further south in Kherson, and then, but if this fighting breaks through and gets into, say, the central part of Ukraine, that's where the great fields are, and this is what would be disrupted by by any major combat.
All right. Since the last time you were here, Judging Freedom spoke to Matthew Van Dyke. Matt is, in the old days, you'd call him a soldier of fortune. Today's the head of, refers to himself as the head of a group called Sons of Liberty International. His group, they're all ex-military. They're armed, but they don't fight, according to him. According to him, they train Ukrainian civilians and military in the use of American military equipment. We spoke to him from what he said was an apartment that his corporation had leased in Kyiv. I want to run the first clip. It's maybe 45 seconds long. You'll hear what he said, and then you can tell me what you think.
In a lot of ways, it's looking a lot more like World War I than World War III over here. People are digging trenches. There's a lot of artillery exchange. There's even soldiers coming back with trench foot. And it's a war of attrition of equipment and personnel that will grind on perhaps for years. But in the end, really everything is pointing to a Ukrainian victory here over time.
In the end, everything is pointing to a Ukrainian victory here. Now, he has a vested interest in saying that. His corporation is nonprofit. I don't know where they get their money from, but they're spending a lot of money. If he were here, how would you respond to him, Scott?
Well, I'd start off by saying, with all due respect, you're a filmmaker, not a soldier. So stay in your lane. And I think he is staying in his lane. I think what he's doing, he's a documentary filmmaker, and his job is to, create a story through visual work to create a narrative. And that narrative is designed to entertain. That narrative is designed to compel. It's not necessarily designed to reflect the truth. I think that what we're looking at here is a world-class scam. Who is he training? What is his qualifications to train him? What are the qualifications of the people he's brought on? I mean, in stuff I've read, the only qualified person I see is a former Marine Corps captain who in 2004 trained the Iraqi army to take on an insurgency in Iraq. And the captain is preparing curriculum, apparently, that's being sent to the Sons of Liberty so they can train these civilians. I don't know what the captain's qualifications are. I won't challenge them here because I don't know him and I don't want to impugn his character. But I will say that whatever he was doing in Iraq has absolutely no relationship with what's going on in Ukraine today. Training Iraqi soldiers to fight insurgents is a world away from training Iraqi civilians or soldiers to fight one of the world's most lethal modern militaries.
Or you said Iraqi, you mean Ukraine?
No. This captain who's writing the curriculum for Sons of Liberty.
Okay. The captain's background, in your view, does not equip him well to provide whatever services Matt Van Dyke says he's providing.
Correct. And now we'll take it a step further. I was a firefighter here in New York for a while, a volunteer firefighter. But in order to train my firefighters, I had to be certified at the national level as a firefighter instructor 1. That means that I could take curriculum prepared by others and train from it. If I wanted to prepare my own curriculum, I had to go get trained as a firefighter instructor 2. And that's a very different course. I'm telling you right now, none of the people working on the ground with Mr. Van Dyke are qualified as a firefighter instructor 1, which means even if the captain's writing brilliant curriculum, these guys are not qualified to instruct it. And they're darn sure not qualified to make up their own thing. So if they are involved in training.
I love you when you're passionate, and so do our viewers. One more clip from Matt Van Dyke, Scott.
Okay.
Say that Russia is not destined to win the war, and buy that argument. That would just mean that we capitulate, just allowing any aggressor around the world, particularly ones with nuclear weapons, to do what they want, and us saying that we're not going to get involved because we want nations to be conquered, we want democracies to fall, because the larger ideals of people living free are less important than the body count.
All right. Well, this is the political moral argument, which you have pretty much demolished. He is arguing that he's actually helping democracy and freedom. You and Colonel McGregor and Phil Giraldi, but mainly you, have demonstrated rather conclusively that they're doing the opposite. They're extending a war needlessly and causing needless deaths of innocent civilians as well as military. Do I have that right?
Yes. Look, again, I don't know anything about this guy, and I don't want to impugn his character, but I will say with the four corners of the topic we're discussing now, he's a charlatan, he's a fraud, and frankly speaking, he's getting people killed if he is indeed training anybody. This sounds to me more like a money-making scheme, where he is using a cause which he has, and you saw in that last clip, the documentary filmmaker in him is now shaping a narrative that makes it attractive to people in the United States who have fallen for the argument that what's going on in Ukraine is the defense of democracy against autocracy, etc. And he's raising money this way. But this is not, he's not qualified to train. None of his people are qualified to train. And I doubt that he's actually training anybody, because I'll say this. The Ukrainians, for all of their faults, aren't suicidal. They're not stupid, and they're better trained than anybody he has on their staff already. They don't need to bring in a bunch of American hucksters, shysters, fraudsters to come in who are carrying out a scheme to raise money in America to come in and train their troops who are going to be involved in life and death decision on the battlefield. They have their own people to do this.
Since you were last here, President Biden has signed legislation releasing $40 billion with a B dollars worth of American military equipment, probably already there, either in the hands of NATO or guarded by the Poles, to the Ukrainians. The number is extraordinary. The number is larger than the entire 40 billion. That's actually 53 if you add the two, the 13 and the 40. That number, 53 billion, is larger than the entire annual military budget of Russia, and it's larger than the entire annual government budget of the Ukraine. Has any of this pushed the Russians back or given the Ukrainians some cause for hope? Or is all of it wasted American dollars? Well, money borrowed in the name of the taxpayers, since the government is broke.
Well, let's start by the numbers, because I've cited the same numbers. They're accurate numbers, and the intent of putting those numbers out is pure. But there are people who will attack anything, and the first thing people are going to say is, "Yeah, but of that 40 billion, only 6 billion is actually for military hardware." So when you make a comparison between the 40 billion and the Russian military budget, it's comparing apples and oranges. No, it's not. Before you make such claims, people who criticize you, me, and others who cite these numbers, do your own research. The Russian defense budget for annual is 65 billion. But that portion which is used for operations and weapons, the national security aspect, is only 43 billion. And when you parse out research and development, nuclear weapons, the salaries, etc., you're left with the Russian spending on an annual basis between $5 and $6 billion to acquire new weaponry, which is exactly the amount that's contained in the $40 billion budget that Biden just passed. So in 4 months, we've given the Ukrainians the equivalent of what Russia spends in 1 year. That's a statement of fact. Now, does this give the Ukrainians hope? Hope is a funny thing. It's based upon perception, not reality. So only the Ukrainians can answer that question. Is hope derived from a real impact on the battlefield? We see right now that Ukraine is losing. So the answer is no. This weaponry is not changing the ultimate outcome on the battle in eastern Ukraine. However, Remember Lloyd Austin, when he spoke about supporting the U.S. support for Ukraine, didn't speak in terms of Ukraine winning a victory. He spoke in terms of the United States achieving a strategic victory by bleeding Russia dry. And some of these weapons have been responsible for the deaths of many, many Russians. And this is, this is the important thing, because Russia is taking casualties because of the massive infusion of weaponry provided by the West. These casualties will not change the outcome, but it does change the larger equation. I mean, we saw how the United States responded to the death of Qasem Soleimani, the Iranian Quds Force leader, whom we accused of providing assistance to Iraqi insurgents that killed 500 or 600 Americans. We called him a criminal. We said he had to die. We assassinated him. Well, we're doing the exact same thing to Russia that Qasem Soleimani did to us, but on a larger scale. So the hypocrisy reeks.
One of our more passionate emailers, and whenever you're on, we get a lot of passionate emails, asked me to ask you if you know about the shoot